because we are going to talk about our trauma survey that we have run now for a month, I think. And I will invite Rachel Glynn Williams to come, that we have co-worked with this trauma project. And I will also invite Marty Simojoki, our loss prevention manager. That is a former captain also, so he has the seafarer view of the trauma survey. Yes, okay. You are with me, right? I'm sharing my screen, so I can't see you. Great.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Johanna. Yes, we're both here.
Great. Okay. Yes. 286 persons started the survey and 91% completed the survey. So I think it was a great amount of people doing it.
Yeah, we were really relieved that was the case, because one of my concerns has been that when we ask people questions relating to their difficult experiences, that by asking those questions we may sort of stimulate some distress. So the fact that so many people stayed to the end was a reassurance, really, and obviously it's an important issue for people.
Yes, that's true. Okay, but I will go through the questions. And first we had some demographic questions about the participants in the survey. And starting with the age, so the age of the participants was mostly between 31 to 50 years old. And also the gender, that 89% of the respondents were male, and I think that respond to our male-dominated industry.
That number's creeping up, though, isn't it? I think the 11% is creeping up is an advancement on previous years, certainly.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Okay, we had also a question, where are you from? Most of the participants was from Philippines and Pacific, but Western Europe and Asia was also about 10%. Great. And over half of the respondents had the rank officer, but all other suggested ratings was also represented here, I think.
I don't think we particularly sent the survey to sort of training centres, so maybe had we done that, we might have got a high percentage of cadets, perhaps.
Yes, that's true.
Important to get their view.
Yes. Yeah, I'm really happy to see that also the portion of ratings is fairly high. In a typical seafarer survey, you tend to get more responses from the deck officers than engine officers, and very few from the ratings. But this is a promising number.
Yes. And most of the respondents worked on deck and 35% engine.
I guess amongst there'll be people who are shoreside as well. Oh, this comes on the next slide.
Yes, this comes now. What is your current work status? Majority of the respondents were current serving seafarer, but as you said, Rachel, there was some from shoreside. I think there were 2 there from shoreside, and also people that was former serving seafarer that were on the shoreside. Okay, but these are the demographics. Should I move on to the trauma, actual trauma questions, right? Or do you have some more to comment, Marty or Rachel, on these demographics of the participants?
No further comments. I think it's quite clear.
Yeah. Please, just like to invite our delegates to comment as well in the chat. We'd very much like your impressions of what you're seeing presented here.
Yes, you are free to be interactive, so please make any comment in the chat box. And Stephanie, that are your voice, can also jump in and discuss with us. Okay, but now we are moving forward to, I think, the really interesting part. We are moving on to the trauma question. So the first question that we had was, have you been involved in a situation on board which has been very stressful, shocking, or frightening? 50% of the respondents had been in an accident like that.
Mm.
So I see that's
Yeah,
interesting.
and 8% said maybe, and that was an interesting one as well. Perhaps people were unsure at that stage, at question 1, whether their experience would constitute a frightening experience. There were perhaps still some uncertainty about that. But I guess one thing that I was pleased about as well, that we had people taking part in the survey who hadn't had who would regard themselves as not having experienced these issues. So when I guess that just gives a little bit of assurance that we've not just overly targeted our population. We did put it out on social media and to all our various contacts around the world, around the industries. But it's good to know that we've got that perspective as well, that people are taking part, not just because they've had an incident of their own.
Yeah, we started out with just targeting some customer companies, and then we spread it even further, so we would get a broader picture also of this survey.
There was a comment in the chat about how about retired seafarers, and I think it's what Johannes has said, that our customers, and if they do send also their retired personnel, that's one thing, and then who's active on the social media, that is sort of getting out of our prime target group, which are our customers. So I think the
current,
the retired, it's maybe a difficult group to define.
It might be that they've retired from the sea, but not necessarily from the industry. They might be elsewhere.
That's right. Okay, moving to next question. Have you been in more than one shocking incident? How many? The majority of the respondents had been in more than one shocking incident, and a fifth had been in more than 5.
So there's a spread there, isn't there? And there's it's you can see that if you've been in more than 5 incidents, it might start to feel a little bit more commonplace, more part of what you can encounter as a seafarer. Perhaps if you get beyond 3, it's harder to keep count. Perhaps we've got fewer in the 4 and the 5 section, but it shows that this is an industry where there's safety is a critical issue.
Yes.
And I think one thing to be very honest, I have my 21 years at sea and a few years on shore, and I learned about trauma at sea less than 6 months ago. And I think at least from my own personal ex-seafarer perspective, that shocking incident, I would reflect that, was that shocking to me, or did I cope? Could I deal with the situation, and then maybe answer based on that? I can't speak for others, but I think that to me these numbers would reflect that. If not having these filters, I would argue that there should be more responses to more than 5.
Right. So people would only categorize their experiences shocking according to whether they were shocked, rather than actually this was an incident that could shock.
Yeah, like I said, my personal reflection based on my own experiences, that I cannot speak for others, but I would at least make the point that you would filter it through how you coped with the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it was so bad, but it was not shocking. We managed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, but I move to question number 3. What type of operational incidents have you been directly involved in, being on board at the same time as? It is important when you look at these results to know that you could choose more than one option in this service. So the percentage here don't add up to 100%. Instead, we can evaluate the results on the frequency. But majority answered severe weather, but you could also say that all our suggested operational incidents were represented here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and weather is one of the prime elements, and I mean, you tend to get more breakdowns when you have severe weather. You do get cargo damage, shifting cargo with the bad weather. Consequently, damages to vessel and equipment could lead to search and rescue, security, whatever, collision, deletion. So it would be interesting to see the correlations, the interrelations, how they play out on the answers.
And we also had a question, what type of non-operational incidents have you been directly involved in or been on board at the same time as? In this question was also the experience broad, and all the categories are represented, I think. Majority had answered near miss incident and personal matters or bad news from home.
I think there's perhaps important to see that there's more sort of interpersonal traumas here as well that picked up, and that's why we were keen to have two separate categories, wasn't it, when we were putting together the survey, the operational side, the non-operational side, and that bullying, sexual harassment, abuse. There's 47 responders there who were subscribing to having experienced that. And I guess when the weather's bad, it's the weather's bad. That's the way that the world works. But I guess perhaps some of the interpersonal traumas have come around because of someone's choice on board, and there may be different, responses to those things.
And I'm happy to see that the personal matters, bad news from home is coming higher up, and that's also, we are coming from a culture that your personal business is your personal business. You don't bring it on board. But in order as a human being to function well on board, and then you need to have the home front in somewhat organized.
Absolutely.
And if there's any imbalance, it will directly affect your performance. And this has not been discussed that much. It's been more that kind of a stigmatized.
And I guess in previous years, when my husband was away, everything would go through the captain. There's no mobile phones. There was no personal direct conduit from home to him at shore, at sea. And so if any bad news, if any changes at home, they were sort of directed via the captain. And so who was then in a position then there's at least one more person on board who was aware of situations. So, but that doesn't happen as it used to. So that's something that people might just manage in a private way. I guess the other thing that I noticed from this is those near miss incidents. There was it just comes just below, the same number as the bad news from home. And I guess I was talking earlier on in my bit around, when paramedics can say, "Oh, blimey, this is what could have happened," and that is really impactful, and that sits with people's tendency to think over the incident. It's not what did happen, it's what could have happened. And that's it's interesting that it's appeared in the survey there that's something that bothers people, that sits with people longer than it might otherwise do.
Yeah, and we are still in our maritime industry in a situation that the accidents and the real incidents are reported, that we are not in a position that we do get a lots of near misses, what could have happened, what this could have led to. So I'm happy to see that it's actually getting the so many responses that I think that it needs to be addressed and communicated more, that how important it is to have these reported and dealt and addressed with.
Yeah, and I think especially in industries where high risk is an ever-present feature. We know that psychological safety, being able to report things that almost went wrong or report errors or mistakes, and know that you're not going to get criticised for them, but people are going to receive that information in the spirit of curiosity and learning. I think that would being able to report near misses would go a long way for safety for vessels, but also for individuals as well, so they're not having to carry the emotional impact of that for a longer time.
Yes. Okay, but I will move on. Question number 4 was, when did this happen? In the last, and the majority answered in the last 5 years.
So some people are hanging on to the impact of events they were in for quite a while at one end of the scale.
Yeah, we just had a testimonies of incidents that happened 10 years ago more, and I mean, whenever you have a major occurrence, you tend to remember it.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Next question was, what type of vessel were you on when this event occurred?
I would like to make a comment here that I think this is a bit reflective of our customer base, that we have a lot ro-packs, car carriers, whereas we have a less tankers, and we also not so large on the supply service, and yeah, I think it's quite reflective, and also the larger ro vessels, car carriers, and ro-packs passenger cruise, they do have a larger cruise, so it should also be reflective on the responses.
And could it be that there's something about the reporting structure as well, the reporting culture?
Yeah, I would say that you have the vetting system on tankers, ro-packs. You are about to get similar regimes, and especially on the passenger vessels, you have a quite robust reporting systems.
Okay, sorry, I have this cough, but I hope you can't hear it when I mute, at least, so I don't disturb you. But I'm going forward to the next question. And that was, thinking about the worst of these events, did it lead you to? And here it's interesting because it was a very balanced response. We had also a comment section to this one. Unfortunately, I couldn't get it into the slide, but there were a lot of comments also in connection to the categories.
Yeah, and the way that we've structured these questions, I guess that clinicians amongst our audience will recognise them as being key criteria that we consider in our clinical assessments for post-trauma responses. So the first one there refers to re-experiencing symptoms or reactions, so bad dreams, nightmares, sudden memories, sudden images that come to mind. The next one's about avoidance, keeping away from things that remind you of what's happened and might trigger that stressful response, and the stressed response itself, feeling anxious, feeling jumpy, easily startled, irritable, and also very vigilant, and also just feeling bad about yourself, the world and other people. It kind of, when bad things happen, when difficult things happen, they can challenge our views of ourselves and the world around us. So and so that's why we put those 4 criteria there, not so that we can make a clinical judgment, but just because it's a way of just seeing whether although that array of responses is represented amongst our participants, and we could see that it is. And also the comments that Johanna was saying that we got was, we were ever so grateful for people being able to share some of the detail of their experiences with us. And certainly as a clinician, I would be concerned of a good sort of 10% really of people who responded, just given the descriptions of what they went through and what they were still experiencing. There's a good 10% there that I would, under ordinary circumstances, be interested in talking to them more about that, just to see if there's something that, you know, clinically could be offered as an intervention. But yeah, there's certainly at least 3 or 4 people there who I would want to speak to rule out the possibility of post-traumatic stress.
Okay, time is going really fast, but we are soon at the end of this survey. But next question was, how disruptive to your mental well-being was this event? And we can see here that the majority of the respondents thought that their well-being was at least a little disruptive.
Yes, that's 89%. And it was, so that's notable, obviously. And I think from the people who said not at all, there was some element there of having taken learning from what they've experienced and feeling more confident then in being able to, having been exposed to it, then deal with future similar issues. So I guess similar to what Captain Tusa was referring to earlier on, it was something that they took and learned from. But certainly there were people there who were describing you know, significant difficulties at the other end.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say that the element of stigma would play in here too. That I mean, we are still in a stage in the maritime industry that it's starting to open up thanks to COVID, that we can talk about mental health issues, and then how do you grade this? How bad was it? No, not too bad. And I mean, not knowing the other things, for example, the trauma and how it plays out and how it affects you, then you might not know that it actually affected you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do we got any comments so far, Stephanie, that you want to share? Otherwise, I go on. I can't see them from here when I'm sharing. So
Yes, there's been some interesting chat in the box here, but nothing to bring up. I understand the time is going on. There's some interesting reflections about stigma at the moment, and of course things like raising awareness and knowledge and training can help to tackle that. But I think it's a good topic for reflection if anybody wants to type in the chat box as we move on now.
okay, thank you, Stephanie. I'm moving on. For how long was this event disruptive to your mental well-being? If you add up the numbers, you could see that even if less than a week was 28%, majority of the respondents had a longer disruption to their well-being than 1 week.
Mm-hmm. And I think, again, from a clinical perspective, we start to be particularly concerned where people are having those responses certainly over a month. But we know we've got people saying that they were still holding on to certain responses for up to 3 months, 6 months, up to a year, more than a year. And they're substantial numbers there. So I guess it would be important to have information available to people after incidents occur, given that there's that many people who would continue to be affected. So be information about how, I guess, what we've discussed today, what typical responses are, how to manage those, destigmatizing those responses. So I think that'd be reassurance and encouragement for us to continue to look for opportunities to put those in place.
Absolutely. Number 9 was how much did the way you felt after this event get in the way of your job performance? And here we can see that the majority says a little, but I think this is really, really interesting from a risk management perspective.
Yeah, I think the most interesting is not at all, and I would like to not to have the lie detector, but to see what was the why would you say that? I mean, that you had an incident, you remember it, but it didn't affect your job, and I mean, how can you isolate it? It would be very interesting to know more about it. Just my reflection.
Yeah, I think some of the not at all people did provide some responses in the qualitative responses, and I think some were saying, no, I don't pay attention to emotions, I just get on with the job. But others were saying perhaps more of what we might call the radical acceptance. I think there was an article in the Nautical Institute Seaways journal a few months ago talking about radical acceptance in seafarers and how, yeah, I accept it, I made space for it, and then I put it there and I carried on. So it's almost as if there's the not at all people might fall into at least two different camps, where they're not attending to it, but other people saying, yeah, I notice it and I find a way of working with it. But I think the number of people who were saying that it did affect their responses on the job, I guess indicates, that risk of perpetuating trauma through not attending to the effects of the first one, if there is a first one. If we can deal with people's responses and down-regulate some of that anxiety, some of those, that hyper-arousal, then perhaps people are going to be able to prevent secondary incidents occurring.
Okay. Question number 10 was, did you receive support for how you felt after this event? And unfortunately, majority of the respondents did not receive any support.
Yeah, and I think that watching and listening to Karin's presentation, that was even more devastating numbers. And that was one segment, but this should reflect the whole industry, and clearly there's still some improvements to be done.
Yeah,
at all levels.
Yes. If I might jump in here, there's some very interesting comments coming up from our attendees at the moment. One of them is stating that some people don't recognize that trauma is affecting their mental health. It is often their family or friends who notice the changes in them. And this is partially echoed in the next comment from an attendee who said it would also be interesting to know if any of the people answering the incident didn't affect them at all were already quite stressed at work and thus didn't notice any change in how they were feeling. It's very easy to normalize your feelings and symptoms when you already feel stressed, and a traumatic event might not feel like a lot if you're already under a significant amount of pressure. I think these were very interesting comments.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're already saturated with incidents and stress, and your vigilance is up here anyway, that perhaps there's a bit of a ceiling effect, that people don't notice the difference when an extra event's happened yet. So I think Myra's point is very, very pertinent. And again, from Leslie on the importance of family, and family being able to signal to folks when they come home that there's something not quite as it was, and that being able to perhaps indicate that they need to look after themselves in some way, or being curious about what's happened.
One thing I would also argue is that if you have an effective maritime resource management in place, and in your culture and your company DNA and your operations, your colleagues would know, and I mean, you could sort of share the burden that the challenge and response that you are sort of, you don't notice it yourself, but the others know this, and then that they bring it up in a constructive, proper way. Then I think that would also alleviate the pain, and at the same time keep everybody safe.
Yes. I'm sorry, but we have to go through this really fast now, because we have very great speakers left in the workshop that I don't want the attendees to miss. So I go through this really fast, and maybe we can make a last comments after the presentation. This was a follow-up question to those who did receive support. Who did you receive support from? And most frequent answer was colleagues, family, and friends. Here I also added some comments. This was a follow-up question to those who did get support, and majority thought that the support was indeed helpful. Some comments was communication and understanding, and it was more descriptive. What was the support, and technical and emotional. So I think that was some great comments. And this was a follow-up question to the ones that didn't get any support. Looking back now, do you think that it would have been helpful to have support available? And also there was some interesting comments, but majority answered yes on this question. And some comments: it's good to have someone with whom you can talk without the fear of being judged. I think that is a really great one. And it was a participant that comment on the no, I did need support but would not have used it, and the comment was company will dislike. And I think the last comment is describing what you discussed earlier, Martin, Rachel, that the comment was on the category no, I didn't need support, and the comment was part of the job. I think that described it. Yes.
Yeah.
Are there some last comment to the survey? Otherwise, I'm afraid we really have to move on to the next part of this workshop.
Just a very, very short comment that it's not part of the job seeing your colleagues being injured and running aground. I mean, it definitely, not in my world at least, that I mean, you need to deal with it, and I think the quite the opposite is the normal, that things do happen, and how you work with them, how you cope with them, and what you learn from them. That's the main point.
Yes,
absolutely. And just as part of the run up to the workshop, I was involved in social media, and one comment came through from somebody on the network there saying, you know, what I guess insinuating, suggesting that we, you know, why we need to look at this, and they were saying, don't play with coal if you don't want to get your hands dirty. And I guess echoing Marty's point there, that trauma needn't be part of what you have to put up with. And I guess if things do happen, if you get a burn, if you get a scald, you can assume that there's going to be provision there for your physical first aid. And I think that just needs to be part of the package as well for psychological injuries of all different sizes. But we need to look after people if they do encounter risk issues as part of their job at sea.
Okay, thank you very much, Rachel and Martin, also Stephanie. That was the voice of the chat box.